I got to talk especially to the people of Los Angeles. I'm on KRLA AM 870 The Answer. I'm on KCBQ 1170 The Answer in San Diego. I talk to a lot of California every day, but this one is specifically for you and for everyone with friends and family. We are now seeing a disaster on top of a disaster. And the disaster this time is the government in California, the city, the state. County's doing okay. Sheriff Luna, Chairwoman Barger, they're doing okay. In fact, Sheriff Luna's doing very well. And the county DA, Nathan Hochman, is very good. He knows what he's doing. We have endless press conference after endless press conference out here. And while there is endless respect and thanks for the courageous firefighters and police, the frustration level is going off the top of the roof with Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, and everybody else. Because here's the situation. We know what is burned and what hasn't burned. There's a giant evacuation area. More than 88,000 people have been evacuated. I think it's probably more like 130,000 when you add in children. And they won't let people back into homes that did not burn down thanks to the bravery and around-the-clock efforts of the fire and the policemen. And I understand why originally they were hesitant. Yesterday were Santa Ana's. And they were afraid of embers and hot spots. Well, if I hear the word ember and hot spot again, I'm just going to throw a shoe at the TV. I have evacuees, and they're great house guests. They're old friends. They're dear friends. All they want to do is go back to their house, for which there is no power. They don't want to stay there. Get their clothes, some meds, get the food out of the refrigerator before it destroys the refrigerator, because if you leave food in refrigerators too long that have no power, it ruins the refrigerator, another insurance claim to make. All they want to do is visit their home for a couple of hours. Now, we have beautiful conditions, an ocean breeze, and rising humidity. There is no threat right now. There's not a Santa Ana threat until Monday or Tuesday of next week. And yet, the only bit of news they got this morning before I left the broadcast was, you will be out of your houses for at least a week. No explanation. Oh, it's too dangerous. Now, I understand roping off the burned out areas because there's a lot of hazmat issues. That's legit. They got to make sure that nothing's going to blow. They got to make sure there's no noxious gases. They don't want looters in there. But there are thousands of houses that were untouched. And we are a free people. And those houses belong to a free people. I believe actually the city of Los Angeles right now is committing a taking, a Fifth Amendment prohibited taking. Now, there are some contrary case law having to do with public safety. But these dummies do not know that they could easily say this, dear evacuees, if your home didn't burn down and you're sure of it, you may approach your home, show ID, be prepared to prove that it's your home. And you may go in beginning Saturday morning at 7 a.m., but you got to be out by Sunday at 3. You can stay overnight if you want. There's no power, and we're not going to turn the power back on. I understand that. They understand that. You can't drink the water. They understand that. I understand that because there's a lot of ash. They're flushing the system. They get that. But they want to go to their houses, and they're not allowed to go to their houses. And there are, whatever hope Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom had of recovering from their political suicide of neglecting to prepare for the fire is vanishing as frustration turns into anger. And I see it firsthand. My house guests are wonderful people. They have lived in their house for 40 years, 50 years, and they're very grateful. It was a white house. It's probably a pink house now because of all the fire retardant that dropped. They're very grateful that it didn't burn down, and they are up on Mandeville Canyon. But there's no reason in the world other than CYA. You know what's going on here is the same thing that happened after COVID. You give authoritarians a little opening, and they will take it and run with it and shut everything down. They don't know what to do. They are afraid mostly of being embarrassed again. They are afraid mostly of seeing a second house burn down. So they are over protecting what they underprotected. Classic reaction, but they like it. They like it. They love saying you can't do this, you can't do that, and then they rattle off acronyms. And the worst part of this, are the endless serial press conferences. Let me introduce Joe Bag of Donuts. Let me introduce Jane Bag of Donuts. let me introduce any kind of bag of donuts you want to name. We get like 30 people. They don't know how to communicate either. Now, I'm a professional. I've been doing this since 1990. If you are going to give a phone number, Madam Mayor, Mr. Governor, give it at least 3 times and slowly. If you want people to go to rescue.lacounty.gov, then you say, I can't remember what it is. It's not up to me to know what it is. I think it's not rescue, it's recovery.lacounty.gov. I don't know what it is because they said it too fast, because they didn't repeat the number again and again and again, because they've got 100 different people who get up there and say things that do not matter, either to the people who have lost everything or to the people who haven't lost anything except time and some insurance claims who want to get into their house. There are 2 kinds of people now. There are evacuees who have a place to go home to eventually, and there are people who have lost everything. The people who have lost everything are Category A. They need FEMA, they need loans, they need help, they need housing, they need the government. And there is a regional center, and I don't know if it's working at all. And then there are people who have homes that they can't get to, despite the fact it's a free country, and there is no risk right now, none, in those areas. So if you know it, Nathan, I know you. I've introduced you. You're a good district attorney. You know this is not legal to bar people from their homes except by the most extraordinary emergency. This is the same thing we saw in COVID. The overreaction of authoritarians who do not know what to do, so they just shut everything down without regard to the opportunity costs. There are other costs involved for those evacuees. The stress, the inability to get to their clothes and their meds. Some people had pets that were left behind that they need to check on. The fire department's doing the best they can. I am not mad at the fire department or the police department. They're doing what they are told. Karen Bass has demonstrated she is not up to this job. She should have resigned. Gavin Newsom, yesterday, he signed a law saying you can't sell your property to anyone because it might be an insufficient offer. People taking advantage of that. As Tim Sandifer of the Goldwater Institute said, you help no one by forbidding them from selling their property. They may want to sell their property so they can get the hell out of California. Maybe not. But it's not up to the state of California. That's a taking, too. I teach con law, and I'm telling you, I don't know who's calling the shots on this stuff. But you got to be aware. You're all going to get sued under Section 1983 because you're depriving people of their constitutional right to their property under color of state law. And I hope they name you personally. And I know Stephen Larson and his gang, Larson LLP. That was my last law firm after we broke away from Aaron Fox. And I retired in 2016. I got no investment in the lawsuits. There are a gazillion lawyers filing lawsuits against Southern California Edison and everybody else who can be named. But right now, there are damages accruing because of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. Lots and lots of damages accruing. And their defense is going to be public safety. There is no threat right now. So I want to repeat again. Here's what you do. You say, evacuees, check this map, and you give the phone number and the URL. You don't read URL, Karen Bass. You actually give the address. And it's lacounty.gov, and I think it's recovery.lacounty.gov. And here's the map. If your home has not been burned down, you may go to it beginning 7 a.m. on Saturday, but you got to be out by Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Why? We're going to have a Santa Ana event. And I understand firefighters are worried about the 1 to 5% chance that an ember might float somewhere. They got 3,000 firefighters in Los Angeles right now. And that's good. They should have been here last Monday, but they're here now. That's good. We got resources everywhere. They're all staged up in Beaumont, which is great because they can get there in the air in a hurry. But there is no threat, none, zero, of a fire right now. There are lots of places people could go home. There's no electricity, no water. It's their choice. It's their life. You don't know the costs that you're imposing on people. You don't know the computers they left behind. You don't know all the passports they left behind. They got to get their stuff. Are you people so dense? Now, there is a convenience factor. They don't want to be bothered by these people. You know, they don't want to deal with the traffic. Listen, you work for them. Start thinking about them. Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom, 88,000 people want to go home if only for a couple of hours. Make them show ID, keep the police there, don't let looters in. check them. The line might be long. It's up to them. We are a free people. We do not live under the rule of Karen Bass. It is a ridiculous, stupid, absolutely dense set of regime rules right now, except for the places that were burned out. Let the people go. An old friend and friend of the program, John Podhorn. John is the editor of Commentary and the host of the invaluable Commentary podcast. In fact, the last 3 episodes, everyone should listen to them if they want to understand what's going on in Israel right now. Hello, John. Thank you for the last 3 days. It's been a complicated time, and I just want to give you the floor.
It's not over yet.
I know. Yeah. You have the floor. Tell people what's going on, because you guys have really got this covered.
Well, I mean, what's going on as we speak is that there is now a real threat inside the Netanyahu government to the continuation of the Netanyahu government. One of the leaders of the Netanyahu is a coalition of a bunch of parties. Netanyahu's party, Likud, is the largest, but there are a bunch of other parties, and one of the 2 leaders of the most ideologically right-wing parties, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has announced his intention to resign from the coalition if the hostage deal goes through. His resignation alone would not topple the government, but there is another, his partner in ideological purity, Bezalel Smotrich is his name, will now be under pressure also to resign. If that happens, then the coalition that has governed Israel since the beginning of 2023 will no longer be capable of getting a majority vote in the parliament, the Knesset. Now, this gets even more complicated because the leader of the opposition, person who hates Bibi Netanyahu more than anybody else, is a man named Yair Lapid. But Yair Lapid wants the hostage deal and said a couple of days ago that should these 2 ministers and their parties resign from the coalition, he would direct his party and his members to vote with the government to approve the hostage deal and the ceasefire, and therefore Netanyahu would remain in power under the sufferance of this guy, Yair Lapid. Now, that can't last beyond one vote. Can't last beyond this one hostage deal vote. But so the hostage deal was agreed to. It's very controversial, and it may be the beginning of the end for Netanyahu's rule in Israel.
Now, the reason yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I listen to every Commentary podcast, so they all blend together. I think it was yesterday that 4 of you, no, Rothman was on, so it was yesterday. The 4 of you said, look, we're Americans, the Israelis want this deal. Is that still the case, even with a possible coalition falling? Does the country of Israel, by a supermajority, favor this deal?
Well, we don't know yet. I mean, the impression that one gets is that if you polled the Israeli people, they would say it's worth the risk. However, and there is a risk, and the risk is very simple. The deal posits that there will be a 6-week cessation of hostilities, at the end of which 33 of the 98 hostages will be released from Hamas custody. Some of them will be living, some of them will be dead. After those 42 days, something else will start to happen. We don't know what that is. That does not sound like a good deal to me. It doesn't sound like a good deal to anybody who is a deal maker. These are not equal parties in the sense that Israel was aggressed against. These are kidnappers. You are agreeing to cease hostilities to give the kidnappers hundreds, if not thousands, of prisoners out of Israeli jails, and they're only returning a third of the hostages. So
I listened to you yesterday. I think it was Abe who said yesterday. You explained all the complexities for non-specialists like me who are interested in what's happening. I think it was Abe who said there are always side deals and they don't come out for a long period of time. And Witkoff,
Right.
Trump's envoy, went over there. Have you had any more insight into whether or not there is some kind of an agreement on the side here? Because it doesn't sound like a good deal to me either, unless it was my kid, in which case I would say do the deal right now.
But if it was your kid and you weren't sure that your kid was going to be one of the 33, maybe you wouldn't say it was a good deal. Maybe it would be better to defeat Hamas entirely than to roll the dice that you have a 33% chance of getting your kid out. So even there, that's not a particularly good deal. But again, it's not for us to say what the Israelis want or don't want. If the government falls, by the way, that will be an indication that this is not the consensus view of Israel. Even if the opposition, which has a sixth of the seats in the parliament, agrees to go along with it. So maybe it would be the Israeli consensus. There is no indication whatsoever that there are side deals.
What has Benny Gantz said about this? Because Gantz was in the
I don't know.
coalition.
I don't know what Benny Gantz said about it. I haven't seen that. He's not really a player at the moment. He was in the government. He quit the government. I don't know. He was the defense minister. I don't know where he is.
What's your sister say about it? So John's sister, Ruthie Blum, is a terrific commentator occasionally.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So she is very worried. She thinks it's a bad deal. But friends of hers say, you got to trust Bibi. And he's shown that he's handling things well. And so if he's agreeing and he didn't tell Steve Witkoff to pound sand, then maybe there's a reason to go along with it. Dan Senor on my podcast today says that what people are telling him is Israel right now is in the strongest strategic position that it has been in since 1967, right? Iran is denuded of power. Hamas is all but destroyed. Hezbollah is all but destroyed. Syria has fallen. And Israel is very strong. So if there were time to take a big risk, this would be the time to take a risk. And I think that's an understandable position. This is a country that has gone through 15 months of war. Everyone in the country feels like these hostages are their children. Not everybody. I mean, enough people feel this way that this is torture. It's emotional torture for them that they're there. It seems to me a very strange calculus that 98 people should govern the geostrategic calculations of a country of 9.5 million people. But again, I'm not an Israeli, and I'm not part of this compact that Israelis have with their government, which is, and though I am a Jewish person, and according to Jewish law or Jewish custom, you are supposed to ransom for captives. That is a term, that is something that has been done since ancient times, that it is not only legal, but it is moral and ethical and appropriate to ransom for your captives if another tribe or another group takes them. So that's one complication, Jewish law. And then there is the Israeli
John, that music
position.
means we're not on a podcast, so unfortunately I have to go to break. I just want to urge the audience, the Commentary Podcast, along with Dan Senor's Call Me Back, are essential because John and Abe and Dan and Matt and Seth and Christine, they know what they're talking about far more than anyone else on the news. Go and subscribe, like, watch, and listen to the Commentary Podcast. John Podhoretz, thank you, my friend. The Electronic Payments Coalition is a sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show, and its executive director, Richard Hunt, joins me. Richard, I'd actually probably do this for free because I care about my points so much. The guardyourcard.com folks are my friends because the Durbin-Marshall bill is a nightmare, and I want to set this up. If you use points, and I just gave some points to my daughter to go with my son-in-law off on a vacation because they've been deployed for a long time, you don't want the Marshall-Durbin bill or the Durbin-Marshall bill to pass. How are we doing, Richard?
Look, I think we're doing pretty well. We beat the heck out of them last year. They tried everything in their toolbox to beat us. They had the Department of Transportation, Department of Justice, and even the good old CFPB investigate American companies, Hugh, just because they oppose this government takeover of your credit card. So look, I think Dick Durbin has 2 years left in the United States Senate before he gives it up after some 3 or 4 decades as a politician. But he's going to go all out once again with your buddy, Roger Marshall, to try and take away your control of your credit card. And yes, that means your reward points. And this is a jobs killer. We just did a study with Oxford Economics saying this would hurt economies across the country in small communities to the tune of 160,000 jobs would be lost. Because look, when you go to the game Monday night, hopefully in Atlanta, you're going to get an airfare, you're going to go to a hotel, you're going to go to a restaurant, you're going to support small businesses across the Atlanta, Georgia area. This would just be a jobs killer. But here comes Dick Durbin one more time.
Now, Dr. Marshall is a friend. I like his staff. And I told him, as I told you when I was doing an event for Bernie Moreno, this is a bad idea. And he thought, oh, no, nothing will happen. Tell us, our audience, why are they doing this? Why are they trying to meddle? Free market people do not want their card points taken away. Guardyourcard.com.
Yeah, you bet. Look, it is one simple answer. The big corporate mega stores got to them. Home Depot, Walmart, Target, Amazon. They all want to save a penny, but that would jeopardize the safety and security of the American credit card system, which is the envy of the world. And Hugh, did you know for merchants, it costs less to take a credit card than it does to process cash? Now think about that for a moment. All the things you have to do to make sure that cash that you get from customers has to get to the bank in an orderly manner. So using your credit card is great for small businesses, consumers, and large big box retailers. But this is all a big play by the corporate mega stores.
So who are your champions on the Hill, Richard Hunt? The oldest, I used to be a lobbyist, and I used to be a lawyer, and I used to get people to get hired to do different things. I don't do that anymore. But we always had to have a champion on the Hill, someone who would fight for our team. Who's fighting for your team?
Oh, look, we've got a slew of good old United States senators who are on our side. This is bipartisan opposition. We have over 40, we think. They're completely on our side. They do not want the government to take over your credit card. You remember, Hugh, they did this in 2010 with the debit card. And what happened then? When price controls were set, goodbye free checking accounts, goodbye to reward miles on debit cards. And what happened with fraud? Fraud attempts went up. In fact, Hugh, this past year, fraudulent attempts went up 85%. These criminals are getting even more sophisticated. They're using AI to try to hack into your credit card. But we're doing everything we can to use AI to our advantage to defeat their attempts. We have a great bipartisan coalition ready to make sure Durbin Marshall do not win once again in 2025.
When someone goes to guardyourcard.com, what will they find?
Yeah, you're going to see all the information about how draconian this bill is. You're going to find a link to contact your United States Senator and House member as well. We've had some 3.2 million letters, Hugh, 3.2 million letters go to Capitol Hill in opposition to this horrible legislation.
Dr. Marshall is very reasonable. Is he moving?
Well, he's moved to Sarasota, Florida, mostly, and away from Kansas. But no, he's not moving. He is joining up with his buddy, Dick Durbin. And look, you all know Dick Durbin is the number one enemy of a guy named Donald Trump.
Yep.
And I'd be very surprised if Republicans are going to join forces with Roger Marshall and Dick Durbin to defeat the Trump political activity, government activity, or to have the United States government dictate how you run your credit card. So this is going to be a very good test here for Roger Marshall and his so-called conservative philosophy.
Last quick question, Richard. How many Americans have point accounts? How many millions of Americans do you know have points?
Yes, so there are some 800 credit cards in existence by some 230 million, and 80% of the 230 million credit card holders participate in some type of reward program. And Hugh, the number one benefit, I know we talk about miles all the time, and that is a great benefit, cash back. Some 80% of folks making less than $70,000 use cash back around holiday season and back to school.
Guardyourcard.com. Richard Hunt, keep coming back. You guys are doing the Lord's work.
Hugh,
and I'll keep working on Dr. Marshall because it's a bad idea. It's a bad bill. It's a Durbin bill. Of course it's a bad bill. Richard Hunt, thank you. You heard John Podhoretz update us earlier this hour on the Hugh Hewitt Show about the shaky coalition that Benjamin Netanyahu now confronts in the aftermath of the hostage deal. I'm joined by Josh Kraushaar, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. What's the latest, Josh? Is the Netanyahu government going to fall?
There's a real possibility that that happens, and that's been something that Netanyahu has had to be aware of throughout his most recent government, that he's had to appeal to the most right-wing elements in Israeli public opinion, because otherwise there would be new elections, and his government could certainly fall, and there could be a new prime minister. So that's been sort of the factor throughout all these negotiations dating back over the past year. Look, the big concern, and I'm sure John went over that in his conversation, is after this first phase, which is about a 42-day process, the two Ben Gvir and Smotrich want Israel to have the ability to go back to war and go after Hamas. Hamas is still, if all these phases of the deal go into place, Hamas will remain in power in Gaza, which is something that Israel said was not an option, and even the U.S. government, Biden at the beginning of the war, said that was not an option. But it looks like if this deal fully goes through, that's going to be the case. So Ben Gvir and Smotrich want to guarantee that Israel can go and attack Hamas and go back to war after that first phase. That would blow up the deal potentially, if certainly if Netanyahu said that publicly, and it's what's created this very this very uncertain time with the Israeli government in these negotiations.
Now, John told me that Ben Gvir is gone. He's quit the coalition, but Smotrich has not yet been heard from, another right-winger. My question is, don't they have enough support in the Knesset to stay together for a year to finish the war and finish the hostage deal? I mean, Netanyahu he's probably in the strongest political position he's been since 10/7. Am I right about that?
Well, as I understand it, one of the two, they both represent two different right-wing parties that are similar in terms of ideology. If one of the two leaves, there is enough of a mandate, enough wiggle room that it wouldn't make a difference in the short term. If both end up actually stepping aside, that could prompt new elections. Now, you could say that Bibi should welcome new elections. Maybe it would be helpful to have a more centrist government instead of being sort of held hostage, if you will, to some of the more right-wing elements of this coalition. But look, I think if you look at some of the polling, it's far from certain Netanyahu could win re-election. And there's a lot of discussion over how the lack of preparation in Israel before October 7th. So there's a lot of domestic politicking going on. I also think there's a lot of interesting politics in the U.S. and how that's affected the contours of this deal and the negotiations. And I think Donald Trump certainly played a pivotal role in getting all the parties over the finish line and helping persuade Netanyahu to make some of these concessions to end up finalizing this very
now,
deal.
Josh, I want to get your assessment of the deal. Just Josh Kraushaar, not the Jewish Journal's official position, not the official, not what the Israeli public thinks in majority terms. What do you think of it?
It's a tough deal to swallow, especially given that the Israeli government has been saying that the goal is to defeat Hamas. They took out Sinwar. They've had a lot of military successes, not just against Hamas in Gaza, but against Hezbollah, against Iran in the larger region, but it hasn't translated in building leverage and in convincing Hamas to give up any hostages without these very painful concessions. And there are a lot of painful concessions as part of this deal. This is very similar to what President Biden had proposed back in May initially, where you're going to see hundreds of, if not over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, many with blood on their hands, being released potentially into Gaza. As part of this deal, you're going to see some of the most hardened extremists in the Gaza celebrating the return of some of these terrorists, and you also have Israel pulling out. There's a lot of complicated details about where and when these withdrawals are going to take place, but it means that Israel's going to have less ability to counter terrorism and counter Hamas especially if this goes past the phase one part of the deal. So there are a lot of painful concessions that Israel is making. On the other hand, look, if you talk to most Israelis across the political spectrum, they've been waiting for the hostages to come home. There are 98 being held. Not all of them are alive. Many of them are in very, very bad health, and it's kind of hard to imagine the images and the video we're going to see in the coming weeks if this deal does go through. And I think there is I think we always knew from the get-go, Hugh, that it was almost impossible both to get the hostages home and have a complete victory against Hamas. That they were going to have to be concessions and compromises made, and that's what's going on right now.
So, Josh, last question in terms, and I want to completely pivot here to Los Angeles, where the Jewish community is large and longstanding presence in Los Angeles. What do they think of the absolute incompetence of this city and state government?
Well, I think watching some of the reaction from everyone across the political spectrum who lives and has been affected by these devastating fires, it's we're seeing what happens when you don't have the most competent government officials in charge. It's a luxury to have some of the ideological arguments that have been made, and Gavin Newsom has sort of positioned California in that space. And then you realize the cost when you don't have people who are competent, who are good at government. Look, I mean, the mayor's race a few years ago between Karen Bass and Rick Caruso. Rick Caruso was almost won that race as a moderate, as a guy who had business experience, who actually campaigned on some of the problems with firefighting and water supply in the state and in Los Angeles, in the city of Los Angeles. And
I hope he runs for governor now. I really do. I don't want him to run for mayor. I hope he runs for governor. Josh, I got to roll on. I appreciate you very much. Josh Kroshauer on X. Please go and look him up. Generalissimo has promised me, if you're new to the show, Generalissimo is Dwayne. If I had a producer instead of a Generalissimo, this would be a great show. Generalissimo has promised me I'm going to love this clip. This is Senator Tom Cotton talking to the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, who's soon going to be the Secretary of the Interior. Cut number 26.
A academic side in that article said that this is a not uncommon practice, creating new species when there's really no difference between other extant non-endangered species for what he called the downstream conservation implications, which is to say activists creating species, calling them endangered to stop the construction of a dam or a power generation plant or a housing development. And again, this is something that was admitted publicly in the New York Times by some of these activists. That's why I say I think it's a scandal of the first order. Could I get your commitment in light of these admissions to go back and re-examine Endangered Species Act listings and identify any other potential false designations?
Senator Cotton, you raise a very important issue, which is the weaponization of federal rules, meant to actually protect wildlife, but to do it in a way where it's being used not to protect wildlife, but it's being used to stop legal activities like the multiple use scenario we were just talking about with Senator Barrasso. It's just a legal weapon, and it's used for fundraising. It's used for groups that are just trying to block our nation's progress. And so I agree with you completely. And you mentioned the New York Times. If that article was someplace else, but the fact that the New York Times wrote that article, I found to also be remarkable admission of at least one case where there was the abuse of the Endangered Species Act relative to its intended use. So yes, you can count. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because also I think not in light just of this public admission, but also the West Virginia case and the Loper Bright case, there could be legal infirmity in a lot of our federal bureaucracy's past decisions. So I appreciate your willingness to take a look at that once you're on the job. Thank you very much.
Way to go, Senator Cotton. Way to go, Doug Burgum. I happen to be, I'm quite certain, the only expert on the Endangered Species Act who has a broadcast platform. And they are right. And Generalissimo, you got one right. MyPhDWeightLoss.com is a sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show, and Dwayne really hadn't been himself since he lost 50 pounds. He'd been more nimble. 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900. And you have been, you're like kind of like a ballerina now, dancing around. You're very nimble. And you were nimble. I however, had to say, hey, what did Doug Burgum do? And you found that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
How does MyPhDWeightLoss.com work?
It works because you have accountability. You have a nutritionist that is assigned to you, works with your schedule, comes up with a program and a meal plan to help you lose the weight, and then works with you to keep it off.
So go to MyPhDWeightLoss.com and become nimble, like Dwayne did. Skinny Dwayne is much more nimble than well, I don't know what we call old Dwayne. Prosperous Dwayne. That's what we call him, Prosperous Dwayne. 864
644.
1900. I'm joined by Representative Jason Smith, who is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Chairman Smith, welcome back. Great to have you.
It's great to be with you, Hugh.
Now, Mr. Chairman, the Trump tax cuts matter a lot to me because I'm a small business person, and they matter a lot to everyone driving around. What's going to happen to them?
The Trump tax cuts mean a lot to every single taxpayer in the United States, because if we don't make sure that those are extended, on average, 22% tax increase on every single American. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we deliver on the promises that President Trump made during the campaign and that the American people are expecting. So we got a lot of work to do, but we're going to get it accomplished.
Now, President Trump, when he was on the program last week, said, one big beautiful bill, yeah, but, it doesn't matter how it gets done so long as it all gets done. What's the status on 1 versus 2?
Hugh, you made a little bit of noise last week when President Trump was there. He has said consistently that his preference is 1 big beautiful bill, but he just wants his priorities passed. So if it takes 2, he'll do 2. When you're looking at the very slim margins in the House of Representatives, putting all your eggs in that one basket and making sure you're carrying that basket over the finish line is the key. And that's what we're going to have to do. Everyone's going to have to work together to deliver on immigration, border, energy, deregulation, spending cuts, and permanency of Trump's tax cuts all together. And we'll do it.
And defense spending. Defense spending.
And defense spending. Yeah. And defense spending. Of course, Senator Graham would make sure that defense spending was in there. But what I will say, I've said all along that the last time we've passed 2 reconciliation bills was in 1997. But I made a mistake. Those 2 bills that were passed in 1997 were on the same day. And it was the same reconciliation bill, just 2 different fragments. The last time 2 reconciliations bills have been signed into law in the same year was in 1986, 38 years ago. Why do we think with these small margins, the smallest margins in the history of Congress, can defy all odds is beyond me. That's why we have to work hard for 1 big, beautiful bill.
It's not my job. It's your job and Speaker Johnson's job to sit down with Majority Leader Thune and Whip Barrasso and Conference Leader Cotton and whoever is your equivalent in the Senate to figure this out. And I will go with whatever you guys agree to. But I want to talk about the actual budget itself. If we put more revenue in, you can cut more taxes. And I would like to talk about revenue raisers. Taxes on gaming, which I don't like. It's a vice tax. Taxes on marijuana sale, which I don't like. So tax it. And conversions of Roth IRAs or of regular IRAs to Roth, where I want a 10% flat tax, one-time opportunity, because the present discounted value of the out years is a lot more money if it's in the in year. Are you going to add any revenue in order to make the tax cuts deeper?
Hugh, I set up these tax teams almost a year ago. They have traveled the country, more than 20 different states, 120 different meetings with stakeholders, site visits. They're looking at everything. We're looking at the entire tax code. We're not just looking at what is expiring in the Trump's tax cuts. We're looking at it all. So these are items that have been discussed. We're doing policy meetings weekly, multiple times a week, discussing all the different revenue raisers. For example, in the 2017 Trump tax cuts, we had $5.5 trillion worth of tax cuts. $4 trillion of those were revenue raisers. And so we're going to be doing the same type of situation with this tax bill and looking at all different avenues. And so any recommendations you have, I'm always ears for.
Oh, I'm going to turn private citizen here and lobby you. My biggest recommendation, every year I get told by my accountant, do you want to convert your IRA to a Roth IRA? And here's the math. It's very complicated. And I say, no, we're not going to do that. And if it was a 10% flat tax, I would do it immediately. So would trillions of dollars of wealth come in because, of course, 10% is better than an unknown. Have you ever looked at that?
We'll definitely look at it. We've been looking at all different aspects of retirement incentives and tax benefits. So we're also looking at 501Cs, like the non-for-profits. It's trillions of dollars within our coffers, and there's some entities that truly aren't operating as non-for-profits.
So you mean you're talking about my alma mater, Harvard? I hope you tax their endowment at like 50% because they're just out of control. Are you going to tax endowments?
Let me tell you, in 2017, there was a 1.4% tax on endowments, on the investment aspect, the investment income of endowments. And this is something that is being discussed in great detail right now amongst my colleagues in the House of Representatives. I would expect that you're going to see a lot of activity in that area.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I don't want you to tax the endowments of schools like Hillsdale and Grove City, which do not accept federal money. That it's the people who take federal money and then hold on to their endowments that make me crazy. Mr. Chairman, in terms of Democrats, will any of them help you extend the Trump tax cuts?
You know, if Democrats actually want to have no tax on tips, if Democrats literally live up to what they campaign on and no tax increase on people making less than $400,000 a year, they should vote for our tax bill. When you look at the expiring tax provisions that's taken in effect, $2.2 trillion worth of expiring tax provisions are on people who make less than $400,000 a year. So if they want to practice what they preach, they'll vote for this tax package.
Now, Chairman Smith, I'm in California for a few months, and the frustration out here is off the charts because Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom will not give the evacuees, two of whom are living with me, and my wife, they haven't given any clarity on, the outside of when they can come back. They say it's at least a week till you have to come back. That's a stupid decision. But clarity about timing matters a lot to people. When are we going to know what the timing is going to be of the Republican strategy?
You know, as soon as the budget resolutions agreed to, those reconciliation instructions, that's a little complicated in the weeds, will come to every committee of jurisdiction, including the Ways and Means Committee. That's when we will write the tax bill, officially pass it out of committee, put it on the House floor. I believe that if we follow through with the plan that we wish to execute, we can have it on the president's desk before Memorial Day.
Now, who is your counterpart in the Senate? We're obviously talking about Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune. Who is the Jason Smith of the Senate?
Mike Crapo heads the Senate Finance Committee. Great gentleman from Idaho. We work together on a lot of things. We've been together already once this week.
So the four of you behind a podium announcing one bill or two and the timing, that's what I'm looking for. When do you think we're going to see the four of you behind a podium saying, here's the plan? And I guess the Budget Committee chairs as well have to be there, right?
Yeah, the Budget Committee chairs are the ones that starts the entire process. Ways and Means can't even start until we have the reconciliation instructions from the budget resolution. I think that the Speaker's been very clear that we're going to push one bill out of the House, and Senator Thune says that he'll give deference to the Speaker of what he thinks he can deliver on in the House of Representatives. One big, beautiful bill, Hugh, is not going to be easy. It's going to be extremely difficult. Two will be even harder. And so we're going to have to all join forces, work together, stop wasting time. The American people want us to deliver on these tax cuts immediately. The longer we wait, the bigger mistake that it is. If you look at back in 2017, we delivered Trump's tax cuts the week before Christmas. The week before Christmas. That was way too late. And then 10 and a half months later, we lost the House of Representatives. We can't allow that to happen.
The boom doesn't start until those tax cuts are certain because people can't make CapEx. And isn't everybody understand that? People like me cannot buy new equipment for studios like this until and unless we know what the tax code is?
Hugh, there's 26 million small businesses that are wondering if their tax rate is going to be 40.4% next year or 23.4%. That's That's why they're not investing right now. That's why they're not making the appropriate decisions to grow, to hire, to increase wages. These are things we need to give them the certainty so that they can start now and operate accordingly.
I think that's dispositive, Mr. Chairman. Good luck in your discussions inside the House caucus and with your counterparts and Mr. Crapo and all the other senators. I really appreciate you keeping the audience of the Hugh Hewitt Show informed. Thank you, Chairman Smith. I'll be right back. The powerful House Ways and Means Committee. Never miss an interview with Jason Smith. Congressman Zach Nunn of Iowa joins me. He is the vice chair of the Financial Services Committee, who is focused on cybersecurity. And I must tell you, Congressman Nunn, since the fires out here, I've been getting all sorts of bizarre email. The criminals are trying to get to people who are not very sophisticated. What are you up to on the financial services to protect people? Because, boy, they're out in force.
Yeah, Hugh, you're absolutely right. The exploitation goes across the ways here. In fact, it starts all the way up with Governor Newsom putting people on deck to support the suppression of the forest fires by donating to his Act Blue account. So he has the opportunity to skim 4% off the top and collect people's information. So it's not just the guys overseas who are a threat right now. We've got our own elected officials. You know, Hugh, one of the things that our heart goes out to all of the families, thousands of them who have lost homes, of the dozens of folks tragically who have lost their lives. I know we'll find more who also have died in these fires. We need to make sure that we're standing with the families and providing the best possible integrity for them to get the resources they need, whether they're doing a GoFundMe page, whether people are trying to Venmo, and making sure that they're not falling victim to catfish and hoax efforts out there. They're going to try and, pillage them a second time. So on the House Financial Services Committee, we have moved forward with a number of bills, mine included, that stops catfishing, that works aggressively after these advanced persistent threat actors, particularly what we're seeing out of the Volt series coming out of China. This is a series of cyber threat actors perpetrated by the Chinese government, particularly their Ministry of State Security. And then even just criminal hackers, particularly cartels and other elements operating in the area that are trying to take advantage in a time of national crisis to really hold these folks accountable.
Now, Congressman Nunn, we have a couple of evacuees staying with us, and they're wonderful, sophisticated people. They're senior citizens. They are very smart, and so they're alert to catfishing. But a lot of my audience may not even know what that means. You want to explain, especially for the benefit of seniors, what they should be watching for?
Yeah, two things we want to immediately look at. The first is catfishing, and this is where someone spoofs you in a traditional spearfish, but they're basically just throwing a lot of information out there to try and get you to bite or share your information with them. It could be something benign like, do you need assistance? Or I've got extra money that I'd like to share with you. If you just send me your bank account information, I'll get it deposited. Those are obviously early red warning flags. We also have something far more heinous. It's called pig butchering. This is a new technique being used by both nation states and individuals where they try and develop a relationship with the individual over time. So it could be in the form of a romance or in the form of, hey, I'm here as part of your insurance agency. I'm working on behalf of the insurance company to help get you your settlement. Please start sharing your policy information with me. And then they're filing that policy claim on your behalf and collecting that money that should be going to the victims of these tragic events, and they're taking it for themselves. They end up as a man-in-the-middle attack, if you will. So a lot of sophisticated plans out there. The biggest thing is that you always trust but verify and check in. And if you're ever in concern, check in with your bank, check in with a loved one, and get a second set of eyes on this.
You know, the pig butchering, I think, is the big problem in Southern California right now because it's raining con men. It's raining con men out here because they know everyone's got insurance claims and they're eager to say, here I am, I'm from your insurance company. How does financial services fight this? What kind of legislation can you pass to fight this?
Yeah, Hugh, very good question here. So we've already started working on a number. I led a pig butchering bill specifically to go after this. It empowers our local law enforcement to be able to use resources that right now are really only granted to our federal agencies, particularly the primary agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And this helps us to train our frontline law enforcement, our sheriffs, and also make sure that we've got, public prosecutors who can go after these individuals at the local level. A lot of these are hard. When you take it all the way back to China, that is clearly a job for the FBI. But when you've got a cartel who's operating on the ground in the area, we want to make sure that our county officials, county sheriffs, local law enforcement also have these tools so they can convict, arrest, and detain these individuals on site. And you're absolutely right. A lot of these folks are jumping across the border, so there's a real threat that cartels are effectively using this as a money laundering source for operations they already have in the area.
Now, if I can switch up on you, Congressman Nunn. Admiral Montgomery, retired United States Navy, was on this week to review the cyber threats to our infrastructure. Does that cross over into your subcommittee's work?
It does. Just this week, we called a classified meeting with the members of Treasury, the law enforcement intelligence agencies, as well as CISA, the nexus for keeping government entities safe. There's a series of advanced persistent threat cyber attacks that have specifically targeted a top 10 number of telcos. This is called a Vault series, or this is a series of attacks coming primarily from the cyber militia and the Chinese Ministry of State Security, as well as ones that have targeted individuals. We've seen in the past during the election, they targeted everyone from Kamala Harris, J.D. Vance, even President Trump's phone himself. But now they're aggressively targeting U.S. citizens, and they use that as a cacophony of information that they then can scale down. Now, in the old school intel world, you didn't just have to have classified information. You could just scour open source or publicly available information, and if you get enough Americans, eventually you're going to find a needle in a haystack of somebody who's pretty darn important. You take their information and you use it against them. So this is the first series. Tragically, just this last month, we saw that the Treasury itself was targeted. They had a very specific number of individuals that it looked like they targeted within Treasury. And while it didn't get on the classified systems, certainly the Chinese penetration of Treasury, who's in charge of everything from sanctions to OFAC, are all very concerning. My equal concern here, it all falls under financial services. We've got to find a great way to be able to punch back at Beijing. And I've asked specifically, I want clear red lines and I want clear threat actors that we can start sanctioning and holding them accountable.
Last question, Congressman Nunn. We've got about a minute left. There are so many people who are targeted by fraudsters in this disaster zone. What is your message to people who get text messages that say, hey, I'm with your mutual fund company, I'm with your insurance company? How do you verify without, don't respond to the text messages, what I say. No one normally does that. What do you say?
One, don't respond to the text message. Don't click on the hyperlink. Don't call the phone number that's in there. If it's from your financial institution, your insurance, just the fire assessment guy, go to their actual verified website. You'll see that secure in the URL bar at the top, and contact them directly. They should know your policy number. Don't require them to verify it with you. As you go forward into this too, if you do feel concerned, if you feel like you're being exploited, or maybe you've already been taken advantage of, you need to contact law enforcement immediately. One, you're going to help other people from becoming victims of this, and the sooner we get this information in, the easier it is to shut down, or in some cases even reclaim those funds. And I would also say, when you're looking at things, particularly costs, go through your credit card company. Don't do check, don't do Venmo, don't do cash. At least with a credit card company, you have an apparatus on your side to help protect you and reclaim those funds for you so you don't get stuck in this impossible situation.
Don't click on the hyperlink. Don't call the phone number. Go to the website of the provider, whether it's an insurance company or a bank. Zach Nunn, that's probably the most important segment of the week. Thank you so much, Congressman Zach Nunn from Iowa, from the Financial Services Subcommittee, Vice Chair on Security and Cybersecurity. He knows what's going on. It's not good. It's not easy. And I am in California in the Relief Factor studio. I called up Andrew Del Rey of andrewandtodd.com. They're a sponsor of mine this morning. And Andrew will talk to me at length about anything. I wouldn't call him about business or about ads or anything. I just wanted to know, in the aftermath of this kind of a catastrophe, what do people do? And he said, first, tell the audience they can always call us, 888-888-1172. They will counsel you on anything you need to do there. There's a method for people who've lost everything. They need a construction loan. You get a construction loan from your local bank. You build, then you take out that loan that's got a balloon payment at the end, and you take out that loan with a new mortgage. And I didn't know that. I've never lost a house to fire. I didn't know how to do that. And you call 888-888-1172. It doesn't cost you anything. Andrew and Todd, Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, are just about the two most wonderful people I know in the world. And mostly they do mortgages for people, including me, Dwayne, my family members, lots, thousands and thousands of people. They didn't sponsor my show forever. But this wasn't about a mortgage. This was about what do people do when they've lost everything? I didn't know, but I knew that Andrew would know. So we talked a long time about this process. And you call them at 888-888-1172. Or you go to andrewandtodd.com. Also talked about interest rates, which have gone above 7%, front page of the Wall Street Journal today. Interest rates for mortgages above 7% for the first time in 6 months. Andrew he said the rates have been falling for 2 days. There are some people will get the high sixes. If you're moving, deal with andrewandtodd.com. Deal with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172. I'm trying to repeat and demonstrate for the terrible communicators of the city of Los Angeles. If you want someone to remember a number, you have to say it slowly and repeatedly. 888-888-1172. And if you have a website, you got to say it twice. andrewandtodd.com. 2 D's in Todd. You have to articulate well. You can't send somebody up to the microphone who doesn't have excellent articulation. No adverse reflection on them. They just have to know how to communicate. andrewandtodd.com or 888-888-1172. Right? That's how you do it, LA City. Don't send up a dozen different people to tell you, call this, call that, go to this, go to that. Very rapidly so they can they're very nervous too. They don't know how to do this. They haven't been doing it for 35 years like I have. And so I listen to them and I think, doesn't anyone give them media training? Don't they know slow down and use one person? We need a General Honoré, remember from Katrina? Those of you can remember Katrina. Finally, they sent in General Russell Honoré, retired now, and he took over all the briefings. Now, there are a couple of good briefers. Nathan Hochman, the DA. Thank God Gascon isn't the DA right now. And Sheriff Luna. They're doing a superb job. Once in a while, one of the firefighters or someone from CAL FIRE will show up and they're kind of semi-coherent, but mostly their hands are shaking. They know how to put out fires. They know how to protect you. They don't know how to do this. This is communicating. andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. That's how you get it done, LA. One person, one voice, repeating. andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. And there is no cost, no obligation if you call up my friends. None at all. Please get better at this, LA. And I've done my rant on LA already. It's at my YouTube page. Please go and send that to everyone you know in LA. Tell them to demand access to their homes. It is not dangerous this weekend. You can't go into the burn areas. But if you're evacuated in a near burn area, you got to be allowed into your house for a few hours. Just be out by Sunday at 3 because the Santa Anas are coming back on Tuesday or Wednesday. Joined on the phone today by the former National Security Advisor, Ambassador Robert O'Brien. Longtime friend, often a guest on the Hugh Hewitt Show. You saw his colleague, Alex Gray from American Global Strategies earlier this week. And Ambassador, thank you for coming back. I want to talk about Greenland and I want to talk about TikTok. Let's start with Greenland. It's not a joke. We have to take Greenland seriously. Why?
Well, Hugh, thanks for having me on, and it's great to be on at a civilized hour now in the afternoon. So
oh, amen.
Congratulations on the move to afternoon drive time. So, Hugh, you asked a great question. Why is Greenland important? And, you know, the left and the liberals sneer at it. But I asked them to take a look at a map. Greenland is like a massive dagger pointed at the heart of North America. It's a huge island. It borders the Arctic, and just across the Arctic Ocean is Russia. So Greenland is really in the same situation as Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Ukraine, frontline states against Russia. But it's utterly undefended. And it's a highway to North America, to the United States. It's critical to our national security. So Donald Trump, for all the liberal snobs that want to criticize him, he's a far better geopolitical strategist than any of the CFR types and Davos types who can't read a map. Donald Trump can look at a map. He's a real estate guy. He sees the property and understands it's critical for our defense. So for years, he's been asking the Danes, who are great people, good allies, good friends, fought with us in Afghanistan and Iraq. There's nothing wrong with the Danish people or Denmark. But he's been asking Denmark to defend Greenland, and Denmark hasn't. And so now they said either you defend it or we're going to defend it for ourselves and we're going to administer it.
Now, Ambassador O'Brien, years ago when Scotland wanted to vote on their independence, the left, who is sneering at Donald Trump, supported that. Why don't we let the Greenland people vote?
Well, they should get to vote, and I think they've got the right to under the Danish Constitution. And right now it looks like they want to have an association with the United States, something called a COFA agreement, a compact of free association like we do with the people on the island of Palau, where they get to govern themselves domestically and we take care of their foreign policy and their national defense. And so that would be a great arrangement. Greenland is a very rich country. It's got every rare earth mineral you can imagine. It's got every critical mineral you can imagine. Greenland could be like Alaska if we mined Greenland and did extraction there in a responsible, environmentally clean fashion. You know, every Inuit, every native Greenlander could get a check every year like the Alaskans get a check from their oil royalties.
Amen. Now, I want to move to TikTok, Ambassador O'Brien. I went around my law school class this week, and I made every one of my law students pledge to remove TikTok from their phone, and I explained why. I'm now confused about what the president-elect is saying about TikTok. Where are we with TikTok? I want them gone or sold. Where are we?
Well, they should be gone or sold. And you remember President Trump banned TikTok at the end of his last term. And it was President Biden who thought he'd have an advantage on TikTok, who undid that ban and let TikTok, grow and thrive for the last 4 years, all the while collecting critical intelligence on everybody who's got the app. So if you got the TikTok app, the Chinese Communist Party knows all your contacts. They know your medical records. They know your emails. They know your posts. They know everything about you. And they probably know a lot about your friends who you've interacted with who don't even have TikTok because the terms of service are so great. It's the biggest espionage tool that's ever been devised since the Trojan horse in the Homeric times and the Trojan War. And it geolocates everyone. It knows everything about all you. And that may have been almost been too much information in the past, right? Like the old Stasi warehouses full of files. It was useless to the Stasi. But with machine learning and the algorithms and the artificial intelligence, all that intelligence can be gathered on individual people. Social credit scores can be applied to Americans. They can blackmail you in the future. So you're a young college student using TikTok now, and did something untoward or embarrassing on your phone was with you. That's probably all captured and recorded by the Chinese. And 20 years from now, when you're an ambassador or a general, the Chinese can show up at your doorstep with that information and blackmail you. So it's a terrible espionage tool. It's also a propaganda tool that's used to divide the American people. And so it needs to be closed down, or it needs to be sold to an American company. And if it's sold to an American company, which is President Trump's position, that's fine. The Chinese communists don't want to sell it to an American company. They want to keep it and keep doing their espionage and their propaganda. But if an American company, if TikTok owned it, or Oracle, or a private equity group like Mr. Wonderful's group, then you could maybe have it in American hands and shelter the data.
All right, last question, Ambassador O'Brien. You're very close friends with John Ratcliffe, who's had his hearing this week, with George Glass, who's going to be our ambassador to Japan, to Marco Rubio, who you've worked with forever when you were the national security advisor. Do you think they're all going to get confirmed?
I think the entire crew is going to be confirmed. Even the people to the left are trying to unfairly smear. I think Kash Patel is going to also be confirmed. I think Tulsi Gabbard's going to be confirmed. I think Pete Hegseth, who put on a master clinic of how to deal with character smears in his hearing. I think everyone's going to get confirmed, and it's how it should be. Just like President Biden got to come in with his national security team, which was an utter failure. President Trump deserves to come in with a very strong national security team with people like Radcliffe and Rubio and Hegseth and Elise Stefanik up at the UN. It's going to be a great Patel at the FBI, Pam Bondi at the Justice Department, Bessent at Treasury. That's a very strong team. I'm telling you, our allies will be assured, but our adversaries are going to quake when they look at that strong team coming in to replace the folks that are there now.
I got time for one last one. There are reports on the web today that the Biden administration is stunned that the first Israeli hostage will not be released until Monday, meaning it's just like Jimmy Carter handing the baton to Ronald Reagan. You were the special envoy for hostage affairs before you're the national security advisor. Are you surprised that the Biden team is getting worked the way Carter got worked?
No, I'm not, because they've been getting work for a year and a half. You know, they took the job out of Roger Carsten, the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, hands. They gave it to Nick Burns at the CIA. They let Americans be killed with no retribution, no threats. The Biden team had tea with these guys in Doha for a year and a half. They assassinated Hersch Goldberg Poland with a Marine Expeditionary Unit off the shore. Did nothing about it. So no, they view Biden as weak, and they view Trump as strong. And they want to deliver a win for Trump. Is my guess.
I would guess as well. Ambassador Robert C. O'Brien, follow him on X at Robert C. O'Brien. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I do not know who's doing the media training for the Trump nominees. First, Pete Hegseth killed it. Then Pam Bondi killed it. And today, Doug Burgum, the North Dakota governor, is going to run Interior, killed it. Listen to this exchange Doug Burgum had with Alex Padilla, the clueless senator from California, about the wildfires in the grid. Cut number 11.
Well, I think it's each situation would vary. But first of all, let me just say that I want to extend, on behalf of Catherine and I, our empathy and sympathy to anybody that's lost their home, lost their lives, lost a loved one. We've got friends that have lived in the area that have lost their homes, homes they raised their kids in for 30 years, every piece of memorabilia and memory that they had gone, only getting out with a shirt on their back and talking to those individuals directly. And as it happens, our daughter was in L.A., for an event. The event was canceled. Catherine had flown out there, so both of them also had to evacuate as the fires were encroaching in that part of the city. So our family, part of our family, saw it firsthand. And again, it's just urban wildfire is something that we, as a country, we need to think. And I say each situation is different, because where you talked about in North Dakota was largely rural, largely grasslands.
And I'll get to that, because you've experienced both. But please extend my offer to support, assist in any way any of my constituents that are friends or relatives of your family. For the record, there's never been strings attached to disaster relief. And I certainly hope this is not the first case. So I would ask, as this plays out in Congress over the next several months, if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed as Interior Secretary, you wouldn't be the one deciding on whether or not to grant disaster declarations, but the department is significant, particularly when it comes to wildfire response. Would you commit to responding to every disaster with as much support and resources possible, regardless of which state or jurisdiction the disaster is in?
Well, absolutely, but I would say I would go a step further, which is we've got to commit to, and maybe it's going to take, apparently the fire in Maui wasn't big enough, in a sense. I mean, that was horrible, 100+ lives lost, the devastation that's there, but it didn't create a response nationally or at the federal level or a collaboration of states. But with this incredible, the largest ever, and when the dollars come up, this could be the most expensive urban wildfire in the history of the country. It's probably a time for all of us together to say, what could we be doing differently? And I'm excited that Tim Sheehy is a new senator. He's the first that I know of who's actually worked as a professional firefighter on wildfire. I know that he and others are willing to work across the aisle to come up with solutions.
And Senator Sheehan and I are already working on some proposals on a bipartisan basis to improve the federal government's ability to help them.
All right, let me say, Doug Burgum is great. He's going to be fabulous. Senator Padilla, call your office. Call Karen Bass. Call Gavin Newsom. Tell them to stop being knuckleheads. Let the people who have their homes go in on Saturday and Sunday. It's beautiful weather. It's perfect. The ocean breeze is coming in again. And then leave by Sunday afternoon if they're worried about next week's Santa Ana's. But don't keep them out of their houses. When can we get anyone of minimal competence, please, in California? In Studio West, the Relief Factor studio out in California, where I'll be for 4 months, teaching constitutional law. I opened the program today, and it's already posted at YouTube. The Hugh Hewitt channel at YouTube, which I hope you will like and subscribe. And you just Google YouTube and Hugh Hewitt and you will. I got to beat Ruthless to 100,000 subscribers. And they're 1,500 ahead of me. If you're listening to me right now, go over there. More importantly, I began the program today with, I guess it's a rant, about the incompetence of Los Angeles city officials not named Luna and Hockman. Now, I'm not talking about the firefighters. They're just amazing, and they're exhausted. I'm not talking about the police, the Marines, the National Guard. I'm talking about the mayor, the governor, and everyone else in the civilian side, who's not on the front line, who are at the DWP and at the mayor's staff advising her on what to do. Incredibly this morning, they announced the earliest that evacuees can return is a week, but we're not sure. Now, we had perfect weather today. Santa Ana's yesterday weren't as bad as we expected. There were no new fires. I know that there are embers in the fire zones. I know that there are hot zones. I know there are toxic materials in the burned out areas. But there are 88,000 to 100,000, maybe even 150,000 people, we don't know if children have been counted, who have been obliged to evacuate their homes, ordered out, fleeing from the fires of last week. They took their clothes with them, what they had on their back. They may have grabbed a passport if they had time, but they had to get out. Now there is no threat. There's absolutely no threat to a lot of those evacuees. Now the power is off and the water cannot be drunk because there's so much ash in the water. They're going to have to run it through the filtration. And the DWP, and I'm not sure we can trust them, but they've told it. Now, we've got a couple of evacuees in our house, and they can stay forever. They're great friends. We got plenty of room. Not a problem for us. It's a problem for them. They're stressed out. One of the reasons, they're a very simple thing, and they know they're very lucky. They're very blessed. They're very grateful to the LA firefighters. They know they're lucky. They got close. One house in Mandeville Canyon where they live burned, nothing else, one house. That's because of the amazing work of LA's fire department, CAL FIRE, and everybody else. But they also had to flee in such a fast fashion that they got one set of clothes. And they can go shopping. They're not poor. They're older, but they're not poor. That's not a problem for them. They have freezers and refrigerators full of food. It's all spoiled now because the electricity's been off for a week. They got to get out of the refrigerator. Otherwise, refrigerators and freezers have to be replaced. It's just another claim. It's just another cost. And there are people who got out without anything. Passports, ID. I don't know how they get back without ID, but police could follow them up to their house. All I'm saying to the people of LA, call your elected officials, be polite, don't get upset. Say, we need to get into our house, lift the evacuation order until Sunday at 3. There is no danger of fire right now. Now, you can't go back to the burn area. Your house might be one of the houses that survived in Palisades. You can't go back there. It's a smoldering heap of embers and toxic gases, and the hazmat teams are out. They're going to need some patience. But it is absurd for the authoritarians to take over and do full COVID again, telling people what to do with their own lives. Gavin Newsom signed a law this week. He thought it was a good idea, forbidding the sale of homes and properties that have been burned down. And allegedly it's for less than market value. Well, you know what? As Tim Sandifer of the Goldwater Institute, one of my, if not my best law student in 25 years of teaching, said online, you never help anyone when you tell them they can't sell their property. Selling a piece of property is an option for some people right now. They just want to get what they can get. They'll get their insurance claim later, but they want to make some cash and they want to move. And Gavin Newsom got in the way because the big state and anti-state stuff has taken over. It's remarkably bad. Now, on the hostage deal, breaking news. Ben-Gvir has left the government. He said he's actually hadn't left yet. He said he will quit if the hostage deal is done. And also, the Biden administration is said to be stunned by reports that Israel is delaying the start of the Gaza deal by 1 day. Israel isn't actually doing that. It's the complications involved in executing this deal, which is very complex. This morning, the terrorists threw a monkey wrench into it by trying to change up the list of the killers who will be released. That's some of the reporting. I don't know. I trust Netanyahu to do what's best for Israel, and he wouldn't be there are arguments that he's been intimidated by President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. I don't believe that. I don't think anybody can intimidate Netanyahu, and I don't think anybody can intimidate Begin. That man was in the gulag. But I'll tell you this. Everything surprises the Biden administration. I don't know if you saw yesterday, Karine Jean-Pierre absolutely befuddled everyone in the room because she wouldn't let Admiral Kirby do the brief. And Admiral Kirby actually knows what's going on. She doesn't. But I digress. Go watch the YouTube of my first episode today. And Hugh Hewitt, YouTube. You can also follow me on X. You can go to my Facebook page, Hugh Hewitt Show. You'll get it all. Now, Doug Burgum had an interesting exchange with Steve Daines today about grizzly bears. I want you to watch this. Cut number 24.
Well, Senator Daines, I'm aware of the data, and this is a super important issue. I know it to Montanans. It's important to people also in Wyoming and Idaho. I'm with you. We should be celebrating when species come off the endangered species list, as opposed to fighting every way we can to try to keep them on that list, because, as you say, the complications. And the other thing you mentioned in your remarks is also the state. Having been a governor, I understand how dedicated the state fish and wildlife representatives are from Montana, from Wyoming, from North Dakota, South Dakota. I mean, all of the folks. As the chair of Western Governors, I came to understand how dedicated those state officials are. I think there's a belief that when they come off of federal protection that they're unprotected. No, they're managed as they are all the other species in the state by the locals who've got the closest data. So yes, I pledge to work with you on this issue.
Okay, man, Doug Burgum is the best thing that ever happened to the Department of Interior. Now, I am probably the most informed commentator on the air about the Endangered Species Act. In fact, I'm certain about it. No one else has practiced endangered species law for 27 years. I'm retired. I have no clients. I have no interests. I just know how bad the law is. Listen to this exchange with Marty Heinrich, who is a New Mexico senator you've never heard of. The Endangered Species Act cripples all the states, but the left loves it because it's a no-growth, big blue bubble, nutty stuff. Cut number 25.
Governor, Senator Daines mentioned a very specific challenge with the Endangered Species Act, but as a governor, you know that one of the best ways to head off those conflicts is to prevent species from ever being listed by recovering them through proactive voluntary conservation at the state level. Senator Tillis and 9 of his Republican colleagues and I have a highly bipartisan bill called the Recovering America's Wildlife Act that helps states do exactly that. And in fact, North Dakota's former Game and Fish Director, Terry Steinwand, was one of the architects of that legislation. It's got strong support from the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, from many of the conservation groups that you mentioned in your exchange with Senator Justice. Does that sound like the kind of approach that you could work with Senator Tillis and I on?
Absolutely, Senator Heinrich. I think that, again, super sound principle there, which is to do the work to keep it off of the any kind of federal designation, working collaboratively with the states. I had the pleasure of working with our Game and Fish Commissioner, Terry Steinwand, for 6 of my 8 years as governor. He had almost a 40-year career in wildlife management. It's people like that I know and respect across all the states. I know you've got them in New Mexico. I know we've got them in Utah. I mean, the people that work in game and fish at the state level that are working on these things. I haven't met somebody from the federal level that flies into North Dakota that cares more about the soil, the air, the water, the fish, the wildlife than the people that we have at the state level. And we should this sounds like you're entrusting this back to the states, and that's where it belongs.
And it was really an idea that grew out of asking all of those agencies, like, what's the right way to approach this? And they said,
let me cut it off there.
instead of-
The right way to approach this, I don't expect Doug Burgum to say this, is to repeal the Endangered Species Act. It's a terrible law. Now, every state's got an Endangered Species Act. There's a California Endangered Species Act. Species ought to be managed by the state officials, not by 2 agencies, but by 1. And the Endangered Species Act is a nightmare statute with nightmare regulations and no growth anti-property rights activists deeply burrowed in. And it's got to change. I'm joined by Congressman Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. And Congressman, before we get to Pam Bondi and the work of the Judiciary Committee, let's do the important stuff. Monday night, the Buckeyes versus the Irish. No.
Yeah.
I just texted one of my Notre Dame buddies from high school, John F. Kennedy High School in Warren, said, "Go Bucks." And I'm sure half my class who went to Notre Dame is mad at me, but really we can't let that stand in the way, right?
Exactly right. And of course, I think the big question is the other great Ohioan, not Hugh Hewitt, but the other great Ohioan, J.D. Vance, is he going to, slide out of Washington later on Monday and head to Atlanta to watch the Buckeyes win? I mean, that would be something too if he showed up there. But yeah, let's go Bucks Monday night. It's going to be a great day. President Trump getting sworn in as president, Ohio and J.D. Vance vice president, and the Buckeyes win the national championships. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
I know, it's Morning in America again. I was there for the first one.
Right.
Now it's like Morning in America 2.0. All right, Congressman, you watched Pam Bondi, and the left just got eaten alive by her. What'd you think?
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. I didn't catch all of it, but the clips I've seen, I thought Pam was tremendous. I mean, here's someone who's going to come back and do what you're supposed to do as Attorney General of the United States, administer equal justice under the law, follow the Constitution, make that organization function the way it's supposed to, not go after moms and dads who are going to school board meetings, not go after pro-life Catholics like the Richmond office of the FBI. That memorandum they put together said if you're a pro-life Catholic, you're an extremist. Maybe actually get answers to questions Americans have, like who planted the pipe bombs on January 6th, who leaked the Dobbs opinion, and maybe even who put cocaine at the White House. She's going to focus on things that Americans want the Justice Department to focus on. And I thought she handled, whether it was Adam Schiff or anyone else, I thought she handled them very well.
Oh, poor Adam Schiff is still knocked out. I think he's lying down behind the bench because he was so bad at that hearing. Congressman, what is the agenda? You're chairman of Judiciary. It matters a lot. We finally got a Judiciary Committee chair that you can work with. What's the priority?
Yeah, well, number one, secure the border. You go back to what we ran on. I always tell people we make this job way too complicated. It's pretty simple. What'd you tell the voters you were going to do? When you ran for the job, put your name on the ballot. If you get elected, go do what you said. We told them we were going to secure the border, so we're going to focus on that. We've had two smaller bills that passed this week. The Lake and Riley Act, good pieces of legislation, was one of those good legislation. We even got a few Democrats, for goodness sake, to vote for them. Maybe some of them are actually finally starting to see the light. So that'll be a big focus. Regulatory reform. You want the economy growing like it needs to. Helping American families, you got to make sure the regulatory burden is not so cumbersome and burdensome on the job creator. So that's part of our jurisdiction. And then we'll continue to do our oversight work in protecting the First Amendment, free speech rights. We've had huge wins in that area over the last 2 years, where we've now learned that the government was in fact pressuring companies to censor. That stopped. In fact, these companies are now embracing the First Amendment, embracing President Trump and Republicans. That's good to see. So we'll continue our work there. And then some oversight work on things we need to look back at a little bit. Jack Smith, David Weiss, the special counsels, what happened with the confidential human sources. That report we got a month ago about these 26 confidential human sources who were here at the Capitol, 17 in restricted space, 4 came in the Capitol. There's some answers to some questions I think the American people deserve.
You know, Congressman, let's stay there for a second. Jack Smith is an unconstitutional actor, and the judge in Florida so declared, and I believe it to be correct, and I hope it gets to the court. Are you going to subpoena Jack Smith to come and talk to your committee about the reckless rogue investigation he led?
Well, everything's on the table. What I do know for sure is there's one aspect of Jack Smith's investigation that has to be examined, and that's what we learned about Jay Bratt, one of his lawyers, when Stanley Woodward, who was representing one of the defendants in the case, Walt Nauta, who worked for President Trump, when he's representing one of the defendants, we know that Jay Bratt said to Stanley Woodward, "We didn't know you were a Trump guy. I thought you wanted this judge position." You can't say things like, you can't have some veiled threat to a counsel, an attorney representing one of the defendants in a case. I mean, that's crazy. So we're definitely going to look at that. We've asked Jack Smith to preserve all documents and communications and all that information. We want that information. So yeah, we're going to look at that, and then any kind of coordination that may have existed between Jack Smith and Fonnie Willis, this whole lawfare operation they orchestrated against President Trump. I think there's lots of things there that we need to look at, and that's why we've asked him to preserve all the documents and communications.
Now, Chairman Jordan, I'm in California because I teach con law every spring that I can, and I have been telling my students the lawfare is unprecedented. It's anti-constitution. It's a disgrace. We got to get to the bottom of it. That lawfare began in Manhattan with Alvin Bragg, and I think you ought to subpoena Juan Merchan, the anti-judge. Are you going to?
We're looking at all that too. Alvin Bragg is actually supposed to testify at some point. We had that agreement, but then the sentencing got pushed back, and pushback finally happened. So we'll see. One of the things we do think is important is, you know, when once Pam gets confirmed, once Todd Blanche gets confirmed, Kash Patel, we'll want to talk with them and see what makes sense, what information they think they need to give to us. So we'll look at all that as we move forward. But you're right. It was Alvin Bragg. It was Fonnie Willis. It was Jack Smith in D.C., Jack Smith in Miami. All of this was lawfare designed to go after President Trump, and it has to end. And Pam Bondi talked about that in her hearing yesterday, how she's going to follow the facts, follow the law, follow the Constitution, not some enemies list like they did to us, like they did to people who supported President Trump, and like they did to President Trump himself. So that's not us. We're going to do it the right way, but we do think it's important to find out exactly what they did.
Now, I'm going to go into the weeds. I'm a big admirer of the Bureau, at least when the Bureau was working and I was at Justice. But I talked to a former special agent just yesterday, and the careerism that has infiltrated the FBI so that you can go to D.C. after a mere 3 years in the field is really rotting it out from the inside. I don't know what Mr. Patel can do. What can you do about that?
No, I think that's right. The good agents out in the field doing the work, God bless them. We had a couple of retired FBI agents who worked for our committee. They were, I always say they were right out of central casting, and they worked in Pittsburgh and Cleveland. They were going after what Americans would term as the, normal bad guys out there. So part of the problem, though, Hugh, is we looked at the budget, the budget of the FBI, and their budget is almost $12 billion annually. More than $6 billion, more than half the budget is spent on intelligence, counterintelligence, and domestic terrorism. Spying on us, surveilling Americans, more than half the budget. I think most Americans think the FBI should primarily be focused on going after organized crime, going after, normal bad guys, typical bad guys, traditional bad guys who were doing bad things, gangs and everything else. That's where you would think it would be. But no, it's about surveilling and spying on Americans. And that is just not what it's supposed to be. So I'm hoping when Kash gets in there, he can begin to change that and focus the FBI where I think it should primarily be focused.
Quick, good question, Chairman. I'm a big supporter of Section 702. I was a special assistant to Bill Smith and Ed Meese for FISA applications long ago and far away. Do you expect the reauthorization of 702 to go forward? Pam Bondi endorsed it yesterday. I think Trump will endorse it. What do you think?
Well, yeah, we need that. But 702 is about surveilling foreigners. Yes. So I'm all for that. I want that to happen. I don't want any hiccups there at all. But when you gather this giant database of information, if you're going to search an American's name, phone number, email address, then I think you got to get a warrant because you're talking about an American citizen. That's the key distinction that needs to happen.
Amen. And go Bucks. Thank you, Congressman Jordan. We will be national champions. We will have a national championship team in Ohio when next we talk. Thank you, Congressman Jim Jordan. I doubt many of you are interested in what my text messages are. But after talking with Chairman Jordan, I immediately got one of my Irish buddies. The Golden Domers are thick in northeastern Ohio. So Mark and Molly and Keelan and Mary Pat and all you other people out there, Mark just sent me this from YouTube when we're just talking. All right. Can we hit my sound effect, please?
Boo! Boo! Rubbish! Filth! Slime! Muck!
That's from The Princess Bride. That's why, I love Notre Dame. I do. I would go there at least annually when I was in college because I had so many buddies there and had a great time at Notre Dame. I'm not sure that they have a library. I'm not really sure that there's anything served in the dining hall except beer. But we had a great time when Notre Dame back in the day. I got to say, it's not going to be close. All right, write that down. Not going to be close. The Vegas line is 9.5, and if I were a betting man, and I'm not, I want to tax betting. I want the federal government to tax every online bet. Good way to raise revenue. Good way to discourage it. Very bad. You put a dollar tax on every single wager that goes to the federal government. We probably could get rid of the national debt, make a real debt in it right away. But if I were a betting man, I'd give the 9.5 points. That's what I think. Let me tell you about AmericanFederal.com. Don't gamble with your investments. Diversify them. And one way to diversify them is with gold. Now, my friend Nick Rovich, and he is a friend, sat down with him in Phoenix last year, talked to him 2 days ago, and you can call him at 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Or you can go to AmericanFederal.com. AmericanFederal.com. You see, I'm demonstrating for the awful communicators in Los Angeles how to give out phone numbers and websites. 1-800-221-7694. AmericanFederal.com. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel or you're watching on my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt, you'll see that I'm not looking down and reading the number. I have the number memorized, 1-800-221-7694. If you're going to buy or sell gold, you do it with Nick Rovich at AmericanFederal.com. That's their website, AmericanFederal.com. See what I did there? I've repeated the phone number 4 times. I'll do it 5 times. 1-800-221-7694. Because people who are watching your press conference, some of them can't hear so well. Some of them can't write so fast. Some of them are trying to enter the phone number on their iPad or their iPhone. They're trying to get the website down. And unless you repeat AmericanFederal.com, they're not going to remember AmericanFederal.com. So if I could ask the city and county and state to do one thing, appoint one spokesperson, one, who's really good at it, maybe 2, right? We do not want DEI when it comes to communicating. I don't care what color or gender they are. I don't. They've got to be good at what they do. Absolutely the best communicator in the city. That's not Karen Bass. She can't even answer a question after she had 17 hours of a flight from Africa to prepare. And she looked at her shoes. Gavin Newsom doesn't do interviews with people who might ask him a tough question like, how in the world can you tell people not to sell their property, Governor? They might need that money to survive. It's really a news blackout and a terrible set of decisions being poorly communicated to people who are stressed beyond belief, those who have lost everything and those who just want to get back into their houses. So at least get a good communicator, please. And I communicate with you, American Federal. That is, of course, a theme song to Dwayne's World, the podcast by Generalissimo. And in Wednesday's edition, he had Senator Jim Talent, the former senator from Missouri, on. And I want to know, Senator, candidly, is Dwayne any good at this? Because if I had been doing that podcast, I would have asked you, as a former senator, have you ever seen anything like Pete Hegseth and Pam Bondi back-to-back before?
Well, Dwayne is pretty good at it. He lets me talk a lot.
Well, that's
which
good.
I appreciate. I thought Pete Hegseth did very, very well. You know, I said on the podcast, it's a shame that that the Democrats went after him, in part because I would have loved to hear what he would have said to really substantive questions on issues like China policy, rebuilding the shipbuilding industrial base. There was some of that. There were a few questions, but mostly it was just politically going after him on things like women in combat, which is an issue that's been around a long time. And the answer that he gave is the responsible answer. I'll wait for the first oversight hearing after he's confirmed, and then we'll get into some of the deeper issues he's going to have to confront.
Now, Senator, why would they do that in a confirmation hearing? I understand they know that they're going to lose. They know that. So why don't they ask the big questions? They can go after them later. They're going to vote against them. I know that. But what is the purpose? Why be on armed services if you don't want to know about how many ships we're going to build next year and how we're going to take care of the submarines that are in dry dock? Why serve on that committee?
Well, Dwayne and I talked about that a little bit, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, they decided, and I got to be fair, I mean, the minority party in this situation will usually try and hang a scalp or two on the wall in the confirmation process. And if you're going to do that, you want to focus on an issue that's safe for you to talk about politically. So they were not going to get into DEI because they know how unpopular their position is. And you're going to try and focus on an issue that might turn some Republicans. Well, we know Senator Ernst feels strongly, and properly so, that women should be allowed in combat where they can meet the standards. So I think that's probably the logic behind it. The feeling that that issue was the best chance they had maybe to turn a few Republican votes.
Now, in terms of going forward, the DepSec is a pretty hard-nosed guy, and Bridge Colby is a pretty clear-eyed guy. What do you make of the team, and do you think they'll all get confirmed?
I think they'll all get confirmed. I think they're very good. I think you're going to see Bridge Colby's hand in the national security strategy and the national defense strategy, which is a good thing. He's a brilliant guy and a deep thinker, particularly on China. You're going to see a lot of that, of course, with Mike Waltz at the National Security Council, and his principal deputy secretary is Alex Wong, who was involved in China policy in the last administration. So they're going to move ahead. They're going to get the national security strategy, the national military strategy. They're going to focus, I think, on rebuilding the defense industrial base, which is absolutely necessary, and strengthening deterrence in the short term in Indo-PACOM. So they're going to start moving pretty quickly.
Former Senator Talent, for the benefit of the new listeners this week, is the chairman of the Defense Initiative at the Reagan Institute, so he knows what he's talking about. However, our audience might not know what you mean by "you will see the hand of Bridge Colby." What do you mean by that? What's the, we got Steelers fans listening. We got to break it down here, Senator.
Well, the national security strategy is a joint effort. It'll be coordinated out of the National Security Council. That's the coordinating force for national security strategy. So obviously Mike Waltz is going to be heavily involved in it. But they will draw on all the agencies who are involved. And obviously a major player is the Department of Defense. Bridge Colby's going to run the Undersecretariat for Policy. He's going to be the Undersecretary for Policy, which is what it sounds like. I mean, he's going to be involved in participating in foreign policy decisions that affect the equities of the Department of Defense, which obviously includes the national security strategy. So I'm not saying that Bridge is going to write it. Probably somebody in the National Security Council will have the pen, but he's going to be very involved in representing the Department of Defense in that process.
Now, Senator, I got to ask you.
And then
it was announced today.
I was just going to say you can't do the national military strategy until you have a national security strategy, which communicates the president's priorities, the highest order ends and the highest order means of American strategic foreign policy.
All right, we'll look for both of those. Now, the hostage deal. I was there in 1981 watching as Tehran played Jimmy Carter like a yo-yo. It looks to me like Hamas and Israel are playing Joe Biden. They went out and proclaimed victory yesterday, tried to take credit for this deal, which is Donald Trump's result. And now it turns out the hostages aren't going to walk, any of them, until Monday. Are you surprised that the terrorists or Bibi decided to make sure that Donald Trump got the credit for this deal?
Well, no, because I think President Trump deserves a lot of credit. I think there's been very much a logic to his comments that if those hostages weren't released, there was going to be hell to pay. I mean, he was pushing the negotiations by credibly, and he's credible in this, making clear to Hamas and their patron Iran that the United States was going to take a hand if there wasn't some kind of a hostage arrangement that was acceptable to Israel. And if I can say, I know there's a lot of angst over this agreement. I just don't see it. I think it's a good agreement for Israel. Hamas has been destroyed organizationally. They operate in cells. They can't communicate with each other. Israel's going to get to control the Philadelphia corridor, build a huge buffer, which it's already doing in the north, and it's going to have the right to go back in Gaza where necessary to protect its security. And that right this time, is guaranteed by an American government that is led by an actual friend of Israel. So I don't like giving up all those prisoners, but they weren't going to get any of their hostages out without a disproportion of that kind. And as you know, they don't have to give up the prisoners Hamas wants. Israel's going to pick who they give up. So I think it's a pretty good deal. I mean, I really respect people like Michael Oren, who I know is concerned about it, but to me, it's a sign that Israel has basically accomplished its war aims.
It's a very interesting reaction to Israel. I have neither pro or con. I believe that Netanyahu would never sign a deal that did not reflect the wishes and will of the Israeli people, majority or supermajority. And I know Ben Gvir threatened to quit. I know the commentary podcast, Dan Senor's podcast with Nadal, I can't remember it. Eyal. And it seems to me that this is up to the Israelis to decide, and Trump pushed, but Netanyahu wouldn't get rolled by Trump, would he?
Oh, no, I don't think so. And that's a very good point. I mean, for those who have doubts about the deal, I mean, you have to look at the leader of Israel. And I trust Bibi Netanyahu to protect Israel's security equities in this. And he's taking a risk politically, but that's what a statesman has to do sometimes. He thinks it's the right thing to do for his country. He's going to get as many hostages back as he can. And the other thing about this, Hugh, is with this kind of a deal in place, it's going to make it easier for Saudi Arabia to pick up on the Abraham Accords. And it's going to make it easier for Israel and the United States to focus now on the Iranian nuclear threat. And I would be very surprised if those kinds of equities were not involved in Bibi's thinking and also in Donald Trump's thinking. So, yeah, there's some risk. But I think Netanyahu is saying, look, if I think I can hold the government together, if I can't, we'll go to elections and I'll fight another election out. It's not like he hasn't done that before.
You know, the whole strategic situation has changed, and I for the better, with the collapse of Assad, the defeat of Hamas, the defeat of Hezbollah, and Iran with its tail between its legs, and Donald Trump coming back to the office. I just think it's a win. Did Dwayne talk to you about that at all?
No, I think we talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, he probably missed that one. He missed it.
It wasn't, I don't know if it was a certain thing at that point. Dwayne, did we talk about it? I can't even remember.
No, he missed it. He missed it.
It was a thing yet.
There's the excuse. I got to go back on there. Senator Talent, thank you so much. Talk to you next week. Jim Talent on X, Dwayne's World, wherever podcasts are available. Quite a blockbuster. All the interviews, all the conversation will be included in the podcast today, which will be over at Highly Concentrated Hugh. You can also go get Dwayne's World, which Jim Talent just told me off air really didn't cover all the stuff I do. And it's like 3 times as long, but it doesn't cover what I do in 3 minutes. I want you, however, to hear the best cut of the day, which Dwayne did find. Senator Cotton talking to Governor Doug Burgum, who will be a fabulous Secretary of the Interior, cut 26.
A academic side in that article said that this is a not uncommon practice, creating new species when there's really no difference between other extant non-endangered species for what he called the downstream conservation implications, which is to say activists creating species, calling them endangered to stop the construction of a dam or a power generation plant or a housing development. And again, this is something that was admitted publicly in the New York Times by some of these activists. That's why I say I think it's a scandal of the first order. Could I get your commitment in light of these admissions to go back and re-examine Endangered Species Act listings and identify any other potential false designations?
Senator Cotton, you raise a very important issue, which is the weaponization of federal rules, meant to actually protect wildlife, but to do it in a way where it's being used not to protect wildlife, but it's being used to stop legal activities like the multiple use scenario we were just talking about with Senator Barrasso. It's just a legal weapon, and it's used for fundraising. It's used for groups that are just trying to block our nation's progress. And so I agree with you completely. And you mentioned the New York Times. If that article was someplace else, but the fact that the New York Times wrote that article, I found to also be remarkable admission of at least one case where there was the abuse of the Endangered Species Act relative to its intended use. So yes, you can count. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because also I think not in light just of this public admission, but also the West Virginia case and the Loper-Bright case, there could be legal infirmity in a lot of our federal bureaucracy's past decisions. So I appreciate your willingness to take a look at that once you're on the job. Thank you very much.
That is the perfect exchange. Doug Burgum is going to be the perfect Secretary of the Interior. It is going to be a wonderful morning in America. And I'm looking at, Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi, John Ratcliffe, Doug Burgum. It's all going too well. It's like, who's going to step on a rake? No one stepped on a rake yet. And that's remarkable. So I know Team Biden is upset. Don't worry about them. They're gone. 3 more days. 3 more days. All we have to do is get through 3 more days. If you missed anything today, please head to my YouTube channel and follow me, because I got to beat Ruthless Podcast to 100,000 followers. Matter of honor, right? Matter of honor. I've got to beat Ruthless to 100,000 followers. And my podcast is highly concentrated view. It's available at the Salem Podcast Network. Don't forget my Facebook page either, Hugh Hewitt Show.